everyone, welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and today it is my honor to be able to present to you Danita Dodson. She is the author of three collections of poetry, Trailing the Azimuth, The Medicine Woods, and Between Gone and Everlasting. Danita, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me, Becky. It's such an honor to be here.
Danita, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a happy, I guess, native of Northeast Tennessee, born and raised in like a home in Pigeon, keep coming back to Hancock County. And it's the town of Sneedville. The Clinch River flows through it. The Clinch Mountains are on one side, the Cumberland Mountains on the other. It's just a lovely area. It's a unique spot, equidistance, 30-minute drive from the border of Southwest Virginia and Southeast Kentucky. So I'm in the tri-state region and part of the larger Cumberland Gap region. So this spot in Central Appalachia has always fed my poetry.
Well, and how did you come about writing poetry? Was it something that you always did as a child?
That's a good question, and it's one I get all the time. I guess we writers do, but I've always been drawn to literature. I can't remember a time that I didn't have the desire to read or write poetry, first of all. And much of that had to do with my father. Although he was a math major and a physics major in college, he loved literature. He was like a well-balanced scholar. And so he was reciting to me the plots to Shakespeare and Sophocles' plays before I even went to kindergarten. Put golden books in my hands, and by the first grade, I actually read. I remember, it could have been earlier. My first poem was Robert Frost's "The Pasture," and I think I've been hooked to wanting to write, particularly about nature, ever since. Had my first poem published when I was a senior in high school.
Wow.
So
So
ever.
forever. And you're not very old, so forever is a very short time in your life. um, but Danita, tell us about some of the topics that are incredibly challenging for you to write about.
um, I think grief, first of all. I'm speaking to that after having produced my latest book, Between Gone and Everlasting. I mentioned my father, and so that book is dedicated to him, but it's also dedicated to the rawness and authenticity of my own grief. And so writing about that was difficult, but I
Mhm.
felt I owed it to both myself and my father and my readers. Uh, my good friend Rita Sims Quillen, who had also written about her father, told me that she understood the deep cut that going there is to have to write about grief. But it tempered me and shaped me into what I consider a better poet because emotionally I had to tap into a deeper eternal landscape. And I hope my readers, and they have told me that they connect to that honesty and that authenticity, which is sometimes hard to tap into. But I've written about grief before. I'm a proponent of nonviolence education, so I've written about the violence in the world and climate change in my second book. But this grief was closer uh,
Right.
to sit with.
This is someone beloved to you. Um,
Right.
Danita, when you talk about nonviolence, I read that you are principled in the skill of nonviolence. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it impacts you and what you hope for it to be able to impact the world?
Yes, I was trained in an institute at Cal Poly, Cal State University in Pomona, California.
Hmm.
And writing was from the get-go a part, it became a part of speaking the truth to power about nonviolence and talking about the inequities, you know, the isms we put on. There's all kinds of violences, even in speech. And divisions and whatever. But gun violence, being a high school teacher, an educator, and seeing school after school impacted by gun violence, the lessons that I was given at the Ahimsa Institute. And Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word for nonviolence. Was how do we train the youth, who are the future of tomorrow, to to be the change they want to see in the world, and to put away guns and the other divisions that divide humanity. So we created lessons all in our given fields. And I, as a writing teacher,
Hmm.
uh, used writing as a path to promote peace. And I do that. I do that a lot, particularly in my second collection. But I think I emulate the spirit of ahimsa, or peace, or nonviolence, in my writing.
Well, you can definitely tell that, that is something that we need so much in our world. It's so volatile, especially with our young, and in schools. Um, Speaking of schools, I understand you have a PhD in English and that you have served as a university professor in Nicaragua, a high school Spanish teacher in Appalachia. Quite different perspectives in very different landscapes. So, can you elaborate on those two?
Yes, and they are quite different landscapes in so many ways, but in some ways, they were just flip sides of the same coin. And I got to thinking about this ahead of wondering if you might ask me about this. I taught high school Spanish in East Tennessee, in Appalachia, to my students in my native Hancock County. And teaching a foreign language, I think, nurtures the desires, particularly for the teacher and hopefully for the students, to fully know the places that you're teaching about, where that language is spoken widely. So after completing my PhD in English, I decided to take a sabbatical, and taught for a while at a university in San Marcos, Nicaragua, teaching, of all things, not Spanish, but English composition and American literature. Uh, it was in the mid 1990s, during the peaceful reign of Violeta Chamorro, and as the country was trying to rebuild after the Civil War. So being a part of that process was beautiful. And I brought that back after the sabbatical was over to share with my students in East Tennessee. So in each place, that what was really beautifully strange, Becky, was I was teaching a language and a culture that was not originally my students' own, which involved teaching cultural competence and cultural appreciation, language acquisition, and first and foremost, being able to write in a language that was the others. But I recognized that in the midst of it all, the environments were really quite similar. There was a rural landscape, folkways, mountain superstitions, dialects unique to those mountains, the poverty and the inequities that of living in communities that are forgotten, both in my native county here in Tennessee, but and in Nicaragua is almost unknown to the world. Um, but the cultures I found are being unique and shut off and remote. If you get to know the cultures and the folkways, cultures are preserved even amid these challenges. So it's the resilience that of a nation of places rising up. So this broadened my worldview, showed me the commonalities and how to foster a belief in oneness, which is the spirit of nonviolence as well, and teaching me to fully appreciate and then teach diversity. And I write about such things. And I am happy to share with you that since you brought this question up this morning, I found out that one of my former students in Nicaragua, Felix Maria Diaga, is nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize
Oh, that's wonderful.
because he has spoken out with nonviolence, um, and was prisoned for almost 2 years against the dictatorship in Nicaragua. So you
How does
never
that make
know.
you feel?
It makes me feel so proud, but that there are people who are still writing and speaking about difficult things in times of trouble. So, as an activist, as I mentioned, my student, I think that it does take, unless don't know those troubles and trials, you're not able to speak for those who are in need and who are grieving, who are losing, and I'm seeing this now amid the hurricane.
Right, because your area was incredibly impacted.
Yes.
in Appalachia, and you have all of our sympathy here. Um, Danita, tell me about what advice would you give to that aspiring writer that's just starting out? Like when you very first started writing and your work began to begin, take on momentum, what would be the piece of advice that you would give to that brand new aspiring writer that's in the place where you, right now, where you once were? What would you say?
I love that question, Becky, and thank you because as a teacher, although I'm retired now, I still, that's one of the groups that I want to reach with my work are those aspiring poets, particularly the young ones. I really think I have about four pieces of advice. I would say organic growth comes to me because I know that the seeds of inspiration, just at least for me, perfection doesn't come. You have to trust the seeds that come, the
Mhm.
phrases, the thoughts, the ideas, but don't expect perfection. So once you um, commit yourself to honoring those things that come to you, put in the work to labor them until they are that what you want to share with the world. So allow for just like you would planting a seed in the ground. Um, Nurture creative connections. And I'm so happy to be able to connect with you, Becky, today. But I think it takes bravery and courage to share yourself with the world, but also to get out there and meet fellow writers like yourself. So therefore, go to as many author readings as you can. That's where you meet people, you get to see what people are producing, and read what you want to write. Read widely from poets and see what is speaking to you, and see if your style comes from just a meditation of all those things.
Those are very good advice. I'm glad you mentioned the fact that being in community with other writers, and you had just talked about that you just came back from a poetry festival. Tell us about your experiences when you go to those.
Going to poetry festivals now is I guess it's the greatest thing I do for me.
Mhm.
Is nurturing, like you said, that community and connections. I just feel wonderful. You never know when you read, you share your books. Yeah, I had at this last festival, I had readers who had driven um, to get my latest copy of my book because they had read my other books. And so
Wow.
they had come from communities, several counties away just to meet me. And that was great. And just to break bread with me over, how we see the world similarly uh, through the poems. I'm happy that I'm going to be at Union Avenue this Thursday with some fellow writers and just being able to uh, sit with people who are caring enough to get their work into the world. And there are always those young writers in the crowd who want to be where we are. And to me, that's reason enough to show up.
Exactly. That's awesome. One thing about Danita that you may not know is that she was awarded the Best of the Fest from Poetry Society of Tennessee um, in their 67th annual festival in 2024. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. That was an honor. Uh, I just enjoy being a part of the Poetry Society of Tennessee. Uh, that is like my home base. So I think you have connections as well.
I do. I do have some. Um, I'm really blessed to be part of critique groups and different groups like Poetry Society of Tennessee that really push writers forward in their work, but they do it in such a gentle way. You don't even know you're moving. It's like a little escalator. You're going forward. Speaking of critique groups and places that really help move people's writing forward, do you belong to any kind of specific writers groups that help you? Any kind of mentorship groups, anything like that?
Yes, and I did mention the Poetry Society of Tennessee, and it was such a great group to meet once a month and to listen to a um, stellar poet give us a workshop and then to
Hmm.
sit and work from prompts. and then to share poems with each other. And like you said, in a gentle way, to cheer each other on.
Right.
Um, the Authors Guild of Tennessee, I'm also a member of that group, which is based out of Knoxville. And even though I'm not a Knoxvillian natively, they adopted me. And that group has been really kind in nurturing the whole process of how an author gets herself out into the world.
Well, Danita, tell us about your writing process. How do
Um,
you how do you go about that?
um, in some days, in some ways, Becky, I feel like I'm all over the place and don't have um, this the same experience on each day. But I will say that I do try after breakfast to come to my computer, um, possibly to polish a piece that I'm working on, just to meditate and see if anything comes and allow. If it doesn't, don't force the process. Or to do research. Well, my good friend Jane Hicks, a fellow poet, said that you can count the research you do, the meditation, the thinking that you're doing about a poem, a piece, as part of the process. So I do a lot of that. So given that, I do, I feel like I am dedicated to the process of writing poetry every day. But to be honest, my best work comes when I'm walking in the woods. I'm on the trail and I'm unchaining myself from myself, and
Hmm.
that just seems to open my internal landscape up to whatever comes. Weird thing is that phrases that may not have to even do with the wilderness, it just they may just pop up like popcorn. So I carry those with me, sometimes a jot pad with me, um, or wait till I get back to my computer and put that down. And then I am a laborer, so I keep returning to a poem. It might have 20 takes before it's publishable, in my opinion.
And I know that a lot of people say read your work out loud. Do you have that sense of need as well? You read it out loud before you actually send it off or say this is finished?
I do. I do. I think because and I'm also a musician, so I think there's a musicality to poetry, vocalness that one has to allow. So yes, I read it aloud. Yeah, that's what I did with my students. We would read, the great poets aloud. Even though I assigned them to read those at home, there's something about sharing the words orally. So I do a lot of that. I also do this. I find a voice on Word document. I use Word and let it read back to me in a non-Danita voice to see how it sounds, to get a distance. Yeah,
What a
but I'm
great
glad you mentioned
idea. I like that
it. It
very
is, and
much.
there are some strange voices out there, but I think that allows the fact that I have to know that a poem is not just about me. I want to see it through. Sometimes I'll sit down and read several poems, both visually and orally, imagining my reader. So that listening to that in another voice is a
Hmm.
cool process because you actually imagine someone else sharing words with you.
But for those
Uh,
literal readers, do you think that's important to say, let's make sure it's in the right concept, the right space, the right environment, the right season, like putting a spring flower in a winter environment? Do you ever find yourself going, maybe I should change that, or does it even matter?
it does matter. I do feel it does matter, and the great challenge, particularly, was with my second collection, The Medicine Woods, which is all about ecology and climate change. And as a scientist's daughter, I took that seriously, even though I wasn't a trained scientist and I was dealing with issues like, ecological devastation and climate change, or just getting to know the fact that I wrote about an eastern box turtle and I've got to know a little bit more. Am I saying that this turtle only stays to its own home region? Is that truth? And it's just so to go out and do that research and to choose a word that emulates the truth to that physicality.
Well, I
I
think it takes it from a fanciful piece to an actual educational piece.
I love
That,
it.
yeah, I love that too. Well, Danita, speaking of reading your work out loud, would you read some of your beautiful work for us?
Oh, thank you, Becky. Yes, I think I will share from my latest collection. The first poem, actually, that I'm going to read today, um, I took a couple of lines from one of my favorite writers, T.S. Eliot, in The Wasteland, and then realized that I needed to reach out to Faber and Faber in London and get permission, to quote those lines, which I thought, never having gone through the hoops of copyright, that it would be hard to do. But they read this poem and gave me their blessing to quote these lines. So to me, that is honoring T.S. Eliot as well. Cruel April, after T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. From this day forward, I feel I'll forever blame the coming of spring for your fleet-footed leaving, a vapor of light and mirth dissolved in the gloaming. April is the cruelest month, as the poet warned it was. Reality in a handful of dust, left now where dogwoods wait to bloom. Life's fluorescence forsaken after I found you, silent and lifeless, on the earth from which the dandelions will flower. And in the days to come, it will be hard to take joy in green grass and bees. And in the days to come, it will hurt to see the stem sunshine and the celandine poppies leaping across the slopes of the awakening ridge where mockingbirds sing.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And this was about the experience of finding my father gone. Um, and I wanted to honor, and that's part of that whole scientific process to be in truth. I found him in the gloaming. So talking about that and using words that emulate Appalachia, and
Mhm.
also, the truth of seeing Stella looking over that day and seeing on the ridge mockingbirds and celandine poppies and all. And yeah, so but healing does come from the truth of honoring that.
I think you're
Um,
right.
this is this is another poem about grief, but also it does mirror a little bit about my father and about Appalachia. It's simply called Threads. Though it undoes the heart in its home place, like a seam ripper slitting the familiar threads of a cherished heirloom quilt always in view, its once fastened lines and borders frayed. Grief still holds on to the patches, refusing to yield the imprinted fabric of years, such as a daughter's memory, resistant to wear, of the day you insisted I meet Shakespeare, giving me a book of the bard's seam work, knowing I would stitch my own life's rhyme. The taut fibers of gratitude are woven in me, and memories aren't as gossamer as I thought they might be, smiling as light in the dark room, like the shine of the Epiphone's wooden frame that you placed in my hands for the sake of joy. Humming a hymn for me in the distance, you remind me that I'd have been sewn to you. Old man walking floors in a tatty gray sweater, your hands tucked inside its pockets, as if you held on to the very yarns of life knitted there. These strands now guide me through the maze as I follow the path from one remnant to another, basted like footprints on a calico road, or a redbird's song in the entwined eternity, stitching where you've been to where you are.
That would be the most lovely video with me.
Oh,
It would, with music
oh,
behind. What imagery in that? Your
oh,
father would love that. I know he would.
Well, thank you. Well,
I,
you've given me an idea because I think put some quilts in my guitar and his old sweater in there. Yeah.
he
Okay,
would. Yeah.
we're gonna get to work on that. This one, although it was written out of my own grief. It's also in the section I call Map of Home. It's the opening poem in that section. When remembering my father, I broaden the lens to not just talking about his life in one section, but to talk about this Appalachian homescape that he came from. And I dedicate this poem today to Central Appalachia and all the lost, all the people who've lost something, if I can get through it without tears. Hiraeth. I roll this Welsh tongue on my word on my tongue. Hear its R undulate like a zephyr, afloat in the autumnal trees on the ridge. And I sense a meaning beyond words. Its untranslatable depth speaking to me about this homesickness I feel inside, dumbfounded with my mouth agape as an echo rises from somewhere deep. And I hold it to my heart like a blanket, as if it were a word that's mine to keep, though I know it very well it's not, though its resonance brings me comfort. But it's larger than all our lives here. We who have ever loved a person, we who have ever loved a way of life, we who have ever loved a home place. It's a bittersweet memory of something now gone, something irretrievably lost, the longing for a time no longer here, a home that can never be recreated, one to which you can never quite return, even if you have all the old photographs of how everything was placed in a room, even if their fingerprints are on the walls. It's the music you hear inside your head that you hope you never, ever forget. The nostalgia for those who are long gone, some you never met, but you know them. So you grieve for the lost places of the past, holding memories, long trace of homelands, the people of one's own blood and family, the old traditions and the life ways. It's the distinct feeling of missing that makes the now not the same as the before. A lonesomeness, both sorrowful and joyful, that springs up thanks for a cherished past and for those who underwrote who you are. The resonance of their steps on floorboards, the clinking of their coffee cups on a table, the echoes of their laughter still in a room. Thank you.
Great job. Well, Danita, tell us where we can find your works. Do you
Thank
have
you
a
for asking.
website?
I do. It's danitadodson.com. And if you simply want to go there and click on my books, or there's a page that also has poems that are published out in places like Salvation South. You know, you can go read poems that way. But if you want to find my books to buy, go to the website, click on the books, and it'll take you straight out to my publisher, Whiffenstock Publishers, to indie bookstores, um, and for those of you who still shop on Amazon.
I would also encourage everyone to Google interviews with Danita Dodson, and particularly the one with Appalachia Bear. Wonderful conversation with Delonda Anderson, and she's just both of these lovely ladies are wonderful to listen to. Well, Danita, thank you so much for your time today with us here at Briar House Writes, and we wish you all the best and success in your future.
Thank you, Becky. It's been such a blessing and honor.